The Aviary by Thor S. Carlsson. Read by Tesaval. Sometimes a nightmare will end only to welcome the beginning of a wonderful dream. You pray that a good dream will last for a long time, or possibly never end, but all things must end somewhere or sometime, and I guess one can only pray and hope that whatever follows will fit nicely into the grooves of past good dreams. You cling to that hope as much as you cling to the hope that the nightmare will get derailed like an express train without brakes, that whatever comes next will be going in the opposite direction and to a warmer place. You were my warm place, my good dream, the dream that was you, lasting longer than I had dared pray for, but still not long enough. I had never found a pleasant dream with a capacity to ferry me farther through the lake of dreams than the nightmare that had overtaken me until you came along. You were the rays of the sun that managed to crawl to my outstretched fingertips in confinement. You were the smell of freedom that tickled my olfactory senses while lost in the dark, and you were also the strength of a mountainside, able to scoop me up from my pit of despair and raise me towards the light and away from darkness. Although you came later, it was actually you who saved me from my confinement and taught me to live again. You relinquished the captor's hold on me and gave me my reins back, the reins to my own life, where I should be the driver instead of an unwilling passenger. For the first time since before I met you, I am standing in front of a door that is shut. You made all doors see-through, so I could walk through them with confidence. Now I stand before a closed door, and I am afraid to open it, let alone walk through it. I know I can leave that door closed forever, and set my own tracks for the future, but if I do that, I will always think back to this moment, and whenever I do look back, the door will be waiting for me, closed but not locked, begging me to open it and inevitably walk through. I don't want to. I don't want to know what's behind that door, but it wants me to know, and it wants me to open it. I can try and ignore it, but it beckons me, calls out to me, not a shout, but a whisper that penetrates and overshadows every other action and thought. I can ignore it for now, but I know that I'll have to open that door eventually. Open it and take a step through. What happens then? I don't know. I'll hope and pray again. Hope and pray that what awaits me beyond the door is a pleasant dream and not another nightmare. I was a normal little girl. I was boring, really, nothing to speak of. My parents were wonderful, and we lived a comfortable life. Normal is something I think about all the time now when I think back. Back before you and before him. I guess that when nothing happens that has any real weight to it, whether it's an achievement, a milestone, or a tragedy, you tend to slap on a sticker that just says normal. That can span years or decades for some, and they might look back and say that their past was uneventful, but, compared to many others, it can so easily be looked upon as a gift, because that is what it is. Never take normalcy for granted, because you would trade a nightmare for normalcy in a heartbeat. Let me tell you that right now. An uneventful life sounds to me like the most beautiful dream I can think of. I never forget the day I met you, my future husband, in the support group Mom had been begging me to go for a long time. I didn't see any reason to. What happened to me was in the past, and meeting other people that might have a similar story to tell could hardly change the past. If it was set in stone, then what good will it do to hear an account from another person's past? A past I had not lived, a past possibly as horrifying as mine. Would that not give more weight to my own shattered experience, and how could it possibly help me move forward? Is it even remotely possible for good dreams to be born from the combined muck of a collective which focuses only on the violent past and fills in the blank afterwards? I don't want to talk about it. I know it's the past. I know he can't get me now, and I know it is within my grasp, the normal life I took for granted. But I don't need to be surrounded by people with the same knowledge. To please Mum, I eventually went and sat there, unenthusiastically listening to horrible stories about abusive spouses, and even some stories that were similar to mine, where people had been abducted and held against their will for long periods of time. Weirdly, I felt like I deserved first prize, since my stay with my captor was the longest, at least longest compared to the 15 or so souls that shared their stories with the group. The people there knew who I was, and I knew that they knew. So because of this, I never wanted to share my story, and, although I was gently encouraged to share my story, they didn't force me to, and I certainly had no interest in doing so. Most people have read all about my abduction and what followed. There was no justice. I was taken because someone wanted me for themselves, and when help finally arrived, my captor took his own life. I was simply plucked from my nightmare and placed back home with my parents, and the events of the past were kind of left to their own devices. In that sense, my nightmare gradually ended, but the good dream one hopes will replace it seemed so far away to me and out of reach. I was surprised to learn that you were there because of a different kind of trauma. You were there because your mother had been abducted and eventually killed by a man not so different from my captor. I listened to every word you said, and it gave me the perspective of the people that get left behind with nothing but anger and unanswerable questions. Why? Who? How? And why again? Why were we taken, your mother and I? Who took us? How did they take us? Again and always again, why were we taken? These are the unanswerable questions that make recovery so very hard. You want there to be rhyme and reason for the actions of people, but the sad thing is that sometimes there is no reason, or the reason is so unreasonable to us that we again come to the same question, and that's the reason for that question being asked twice. Why? You spoke so elegantly and without the constraints of the near past, with its shackles around your limbs. Your tragedy had happened when you were just a boy, and now, as a young man, the event was cemented into your past, and talking about it became almost a normal thing, therefore making a horrible event just a normal part of life. My wounds were still fresh, since my nightmare had ended just a short time ago, compared to yours. We got to small talk after a few meetings, and eventually you asked me out for coffee, and that became our thing for a while. We could get coffee after meetings. We never talked about my past. You never asked, and I didn't offer it up, until one day. You very carefully asked me what kept me going all those years. I could see that asking me was hard, not only because of how talking about it might upset me, but also how it might upset you. In you I saw my family, and everyone left in the dark, while I was held in it, and in me you saw your mother, the person that was abducted. I instinctively understood that we wanted to ask the other side a question, but we were also afraid to know the answers. You looked down into your coffee, and you listened to me. I told you then about the aviary, the birds. When I was 16, a man I did not know abducted me. I don't know what happened, except that one minute I was walking home from school, and the next I wake up on a concrete floor in a windowless room that would serve as my home for the next 10 years. During my 10 years' stay as his captive, he never once uttered a single word. I was raped repeatedly, but apart from that, there was no violence, unless I struggled. And then the only violence was him subduing me, breaking me, making me docile like a lifeless puppet. It really is a blur, a chunk of time I cannot place, peppered with sexual abuse and silence. The silence was louder than the screams of thousands. When I finally lost track of time, I heard them. The minute I gave up they sang, the birds. When he was having his way with me, I focused on them. I imagined their freedom, and I visualized them taking flight, going wherever they pleased, and singing the whole time. When I turned myself off, I imagined that one day the birds would find me and lead me to their sanctuary, a beautiful aviary with birds of all colors and sizes. They would flutter around me and protect me, fly me away to wherever I wanted to go. But I wouldn't want to go anywhere. I wanted to be safe with them in the aviary. I imagined going to sleep amongst hummingbirds and swallows. I imagined being gently woken by a family of sparrows and robins, protected by a band of hawks and eagles. I didn't have any knowledge of birds then, but they became my favorite thing in the world, and apart from you, they remained my only passion. We got married. I moved into the house you had inherited from your father, and on our wedding day you led me into the yard, blindfolded, down the path at the back of the house, and there we stopped. You told me that if I ever felt scared or confused, I would know that it could always come here, and I could wait for you here amongst the birds. You had built me the most beautiful aviary I could imagine. There were roses everywhere, ones you had planted, so they would never go away, and in the middle was a bench for me, for us, to sit on and listen to the bird songs. There were so many birds, and each and every one of them sang my favorite song, a song of freedom and security. It was the most wonderful and amazing gift I could ever imagine. So when I got the news, after 4 years of marriage, that you were not coming home, that's where I went, straight to the aviary. You had been sideswiped off the road, and apparently killed instantly. You hadn't suffered, they said, but my world collapsed. The only thing that kept me going, just like in the past, was the aviary. Sometimes I would sit in the aviary, and I would see you sitting on the bench next to me, with your eyes closed, but smiling and listening to the birds. You would sometimes open your eyes and look at me, smiling, and tell me, without words, that I would never lose you, because you would remain with my saviors, the birds, forever. One day I got a box with your belongings sent from the hospital. Your clothes, watch, wedding ring, and your wallet. I opened your wallet and saw a picture of your mother and a picture of the two of us. But then I saw something that turned my world upside down. Sometimes you get news so disturbing that time slows to a crawl, and you piece together a mental picture in your head, much like a quilt. But this quilt was not finished, and the door I talked about before, the one I now stand before, unsure if I should go through or not, appeared before me, and will remain with me until I open it. With time crawling by at 1/100 the normal speed, I realized that we never once talked about your father. I don't know why. I had assumed he had left you and your mother when you were young. I was too busy healing to even think about it. But here before me, in your wallet, behind the picture of your mother, behind the picture of the two of us smiling in the aviary you built for me, there was a picture of you as a child being held by your father. The thing that rocked me to my core, that made me again long to be nowhere else other than surrounded by the birds, was seeing that picture of you with your father. The man holding you as a child, that man was my captor.